I heard my own son laugh and say my plane had gone down, and that the 18 million was finally his. I was standing in the dark entryway of my own house in Lake Forest, Illinois, with my overnight bag still hanging from my shoulder and my car keys biting into my palm. The marble floor under my shoes felt cold, even through the soles. Outside, rain tapped against the tall windows like nervous fingers. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish, old money, and the lavender candles my housekeeper always lit after dinner. I was supposed to be dead. At least that was what the television was saying. At least that was what my son wanted to believe. My flight to Denver had taken off without me 5 hours earlier. A ridiculous problem with my passport card, of all things, had kept me from boarding. I had argued with the airline clerk until my throat hurt, called my assistant, called the conference organizer, and then finally admitted defeat. I was 62, exhausted, humiliated, and furious at myself for not checking every document twice. I drove home in a storm, thinking I would slip inside, take a shower, and sleep before telling everyone in the morning that I had missed the flight. Then the breaking news alert came on the radio. Midwest Air Flight 417 had disappeared from radar shortly after takeoff. Debris had been spotted in a field near Des Moines. There were no confirmed survivors. For 20 seconds, I could not breathe. Not because I had almost died. Because every person who loved me would believe I had. I pulled over on the shoulder of I-94 and shook so hard I could barely hold my phone. I thought about my husband, Richard, who had been dead for 4 years. I thought about my son, Preston, my only child. I imagined him getting the call, falling apart, whispering, "No, no, not Mom." That was the son I had raised in my mind. The son behind the French doors of my living room was not that man. "The plane went down," Preston said, his voice bright with a kind of relief that made my blood turn to ice. "The news keeps saying there are no survivors. Do you understand what this means, Madison? It's done. The 18 million icers." I froze. Madison. His business consultant. That was how he had introduced her 7 months earlier. She was 31, polished, blonde, beautiful in that sharp way some people use as a weapon. She had designer nails, diamond studs, and a smile that never reached her eyes. From the first dinner, she looked at me like I was an old painting that needed to be removed from a wall before the real renovation could begin. I had told myself I was being unfair. Widows get suspicious, I had thought. Mothers get jealous when their sons start listening to another woman. So I tried. I invited her to brunch. I asked about her work. I gave her the benefit of the doubt even after she called me sweet in that slow, sugary tone people use for dogs and confused elderly relatives. Now she was in my living room, listening to my son celebrate my death. Preston laughed again. That laugh had once been the sound I loved most in the world. When he was 7, Hugh would laugh like that running through the backyard with muddy knees, begging me to watch him jump off the low stone wall near the hydrangeas. When he was 14, Hell'd like that after Richard caught him sneaking beer from the garage fridge and made him clean the gutters as punishment. When he was 22, he laughed like that in the hospital room. After Richard's first heart procedure, trying to convince us all that everything would be fine. Now that laugh was standing over my grave before anyone had even dug it. Madison said something too low for me to hear. Preston answered, "No, they won't question it." She was 62 and traveling alone. It's a tragedy. People love tragedies, they send flowers, cry for 2 weeks, and then move on. My knees almost gave out. I ached for the wall and knocked against the framed black and white photograph of Richard and me at our 30th anniversary party. The frame shifted. I grabbed it before it fell. Preston kept talking. Madison laughed softly. "She trusted me," Preston said, "that was the whole point." The whole point. Something inside me cracked so quietly no one in the next room heard it. I wanted to storm in. I wanted to slap him so hard his perfect white teeth cut his cheek. I wanted to scream, "I am your mother." I wanted to remind him of every fever I sat through, every tuition bill I paid, every birthday cake I baked even after Richard made enough money for us to hire anyone to do anything. I wanted to ask how long he had been waiting for me to die. But my hand drifted to the small gold cross at my neck, the one Richard had given me on our last Christmas together. My fingers closed around it. I heard his voice in my memory, calm and steady the way it had been whenever business deals got ugly. "Never give a liar the advantage of your Ranger, Vivian. Make him comfortable. Then make him careless." I stepped back from the door. My overnight bag bumped against the umbrella stand. I caught it before it made noise. My breath came in short, silent bursts. My heart was pounding so violently it hot. They would hear it through the walls. Preston said, "Once the death certificate ISIS sued, we move fast. I don't want Aunt Lydia or those charity vultures sniffing around." Charity vultures. He meant the children's hospital wing Richard and I had funded after losing our first baby before Preston was born. He meant the Veterans Housing Program Richard had loved because his father served in Korea. He meant the scholarship fund for kids from the South Side, the one I visited every year. He meant every place where money did something besides decorate a rich man's life. I backed out of my own house like a thief. The rain hit my face the second I stepped onto the porch. I did not open an umbrella. I did not even feel the cold at first. I moved on instinct, down the steps, across the circular driveway, into my car. Only when Ish at the door did my body begin to shake. I drove without knowing where I was going. Lake Forest at night is quiet in a way that can feel holy or dead, depending on what you carry inside you. The big houses sat behind iron gates and dark lawns, their windows glowing like secrets. I passed the country club, the church where Preston had been confirmed, the bakery where Richard used to buy cinnamon rolls every Sunday even though his cardiologist had warned him. Finally, I ended up at the cemetery. The gate was locked, so I parked outside and sat facing the dark line of trees beyond the stone wall. Richard was buried in there. I could not see his grave, but I knew exactly where it was. Section 8. Row 3. Under the oak that turned red before all the others in October. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I was wrong, I whispered. It hot he was grieving. With me. I thought he was helping me. After Richard died, Preston moved back into the house, temporarily. He said I shouldn't be alone rattling around in 9,000 square feet of memories. He said he would handle the bills, the rental properties, the investment meetings, the tax paperwork. Just until you feel steady, Mom, he told me. Dad would want me to protect you. I believed him because I needed to. Richard had built Bennett Development from 2 duplexes and a stubborn dream into a real estate company that owned apartments, commercial lots, and half a dozen medical office buildings across Illinois and Wisconsin. I had never been useless, but Richard was the numbers man. I handled the foundation, the family events, the community relationships, the human side of the empire. After he died, the paperwork felt like a foreign language written in grief. Preston was confident. Preston had a business degree. Preston wore Richard's old watch and sat at Richard's desk and spoke to lawyers in a voice that sounded almost like his father's if I didn't listen too closely. He brought me forms and said, "This is just for taxes." He brought me documents and said, "This lets metal to the bank so you don't have to." He brought me tea in the evenings and said, "You're not sleeping enough." And little by little, he made me feel small. When I forgot Aiden a reservation, he frowned and said, "Mom, we talked about this 3 times." When I asked about a $400,000 withdrawal, he kissed my forehead and said, "You're mixing UP accounts again." When I wanted to attend a board meeting, he sighed in front of the attorney and said, "She gets overwhelmed now." I let him. Not because I was weak, because I was lonely. That is the part people do not understand about betrayal. It does not always break down the door. Sometimes it brings soup, asks if you took your vitamins, and calls you mom in a soft voice. At dawn, I drove to a small hotel near the lake and paid cash for a room. The woman at the desk barely looked at me. My hair was wet, my mascara had run, and I probably looked like one of those society women who had discovered her husband's mistress and needed a place to collapse. I did not collapse. I showered. I wrapped myself in a stiff white robe. I turned on the news and watched strangers describe the crash I had not been on. Authorities are working to notify families, the anchor said. Families. I wondered if Preston had cried for the cameras yet. By 8:15, I had made 3 decisions. I would not tell Preston what I had heard. I would not confront him without proof. And I would not die conveniently for anyone. At 9:02, my phone rang. Preston's name lit the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. He called again. And again. Then a text appeared. "Mom? Please call me. I need to know if you got on that plane." For almost a minute, I stared at those words. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "I love you." I need to know. I typed nothing back. At 10:30, I returned home. This time, I did not sneak. I walked through the front door carrying my bag, wearing the same navy suit I had worn to the airport, my hair pinned neatly, my cross resting at my collarbone. Gloria, my housekeeper of 19 years, came out of the kitchen holding a mug of coffee. She was a broad-shouldered woman from Milwaukee with gray streaks in her black hair and a heart that noticed everything. She gasped when she saw me. "Mrs. Bennett? Dear God. Are you all right?" "I missed the flight," I said. My voice sounded so normal it frightened me. There was an issue at the airport. I stayed near O'Hare. Her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Preston has been calling everyone." "I'm sure he has." He was in the breakfast room. The television was on. A photo of the crash site filled the screen, all smoke and twisted metal and emergency lights. Preston stood beside the table in sweatpants and Richard's old Northwestern hoodie. His phone was in his hand. Madison sat beside him, one bare leg crossed over the other, scrolling through something like she was waiting for brunch. Preston looked up. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost violent. His phone slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. "Mom," he whispered. Madison turned. For 1 second, her expression showed the truth, not relief. Not shock. Calculation. Pure and cold. Then Preston staggered backward, grabbed the edge of the table, and collapsed onto the Persian rug. Gloria screamed. Madison jumped up and shouted his name. I stood in the doorway, looking down at my only child as he lay pale and shaking on the floor beneath a television that still insisted I was dead. And in that terrible moment, I knew grief had been replaced by something sharper. I was not looking at my son anymore. I was looking at a man who had been waiting for an inheritance. Gloria called 911 while Madison slapped Preston's face a little too hard and kept saying, "Baby, wake up," as if she were auditioning for sympathy. I knelt beside him because old habits do not vanish just because love has been poisoned. I checked his pulse. It was fast but steady. His eyelids fluttered when he opened his eyes and saw me. He began to sob. "Mom," he choked. "Mom, thank God. I thought you were dead." "I know," I said. He grabbed my wrist. His hand was clammy. "I saw the news. I kept calling you. I didn't know what to do." Madison's eyes flicked toward me. I looked at her until she looked away. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. By then Preston was sitting upright, insisting he did not need a hospital. He said had fainted. From shock. He said his blood sugar was low. He said the last 12 hours had been traumatic. He said many things. I listened the way I once listened to contractors explain why a project was delayed. Calmly. Patiently. Without believing a word until I saw the paperwork. After the paramedics left, Preston followed me into the library and shut the door. The library was Richard's favorite room. Walnut shelves. Green leather chairs. A globe from his father. The faint smell of cigars. He had not smoked indoors since 1998 because I hated it. Preston had been sitting at Richard's desk for 4 years, but that morning, for the first time, he looked like a boy wearing clothes too large for him. "I'm sorry I scared you," I said. He stared at me. "You scared me?" His voice cracked. "Mom, I thought you were gone." "So you said." He swallowed. "Where were you?" "At a hotel." "Why didn't you call?" "I was tired." "Tired?" He laughed once, too sharply. "A plane crashed and everyone thought you were on it." "I wasn't." His eye searched my face. "Did you come home last night?" There it was. The tiny crack in the mask. I tilted my head. "Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Gloria thought she heard something. That's all." "Did she?" "I don't know. The house makes noises." "Yes," I said. "It does." Silence stretched between us. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. "My God, Mom," he whispered into my hair. "I can't lose you too." For one heartbeat, my body remembered him. The child with sticky fingers. The teenager who cried when our golden retriever died. The young man who held my hand at Richard's funeral. My arms almost rose. Almost. Then I remembered his voice saying, "She trusted me." That was the whole point. I let him hug a woman who was no longer available to be fooled. That afternoon, I pretended to rest. Preston brought me chamomile tea with honey. I smiled, took the cup, and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." He looked relieved. The moment he left, I poured it into the soil of the fiddle leaf fig by the window. At 4:00, I called Thomas Blackwell. Thomas had been Richard's estate attorney for 27 years. He was 71, dry as toast, and honest in the old-fashioned way that made people underestimate him. He had once told me that rich families do not fall apart because of money. They fall apart because money gives bad character a microphone. "Vivian," he said when he heard my voice. "Thank God. Preston called this morning in a state. We were told you were presumed dead." "I was presumed useful," I said. "There's a difference." He went quiet. "I need to come in tomorrow," I said. Privately. "No, Preston." "Of course." "And Thomas?" "Yes. I need to know exactly what my son has done with Richard's estate." There was another silence. This one was heavier. "I was afraid you might ask that one day," he said. I arrived at Thomas's office the next morning wearing pearls, dark glasses, and the face of a woman who had spent 4 years being told she was too fragile for the truth. His office overlooked the river. The windows were tall, the furniture old, the carpet worn down by decades of wealthy people trying not to show panic. Thomas's assistant brought coffee. I did not touch it. Thomas placed 6 folders in front of me. "These are summaries," he said. "Not accusations yet. But patterns." I opened the first folder. Transfers. Withdrawals. Property title changes. Loans taken against buildings Richard had paid off years before. My signature appeared again and again, sometimes shaky. Sometimes too perfect. Sometimes on dates when I knew I had been out of town or recovering from a dental surgery or attending a charity luncheon with 200 witnesses. How much? I asked. Thomas removed his glasses. From what we can verify quickly, around 7.4 million moved, borrowed against, or redirected in the last 2 years. Potentially more. The room narrowed. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. He told me those were tax documents. I know. You knew? I suspected. But you signed several authorizations granting him broad management powers. Richard's trust gave you full control, but you delegated much of it to Preston. Because he was my son. Thomas's expression softened in a way that almost made me break. Yes, he said. That is usually how this begins. The second folder contained emails between Preston and bankers. In some, he referred to me as declining. In others, emotionally unstable since Richard's death. One message to a wealth manager said, "My mother is still technically the controlling beneficiary, but practically speaking I make all decisions now." Technically. Practically. I pressed my fingers to my cross. What else? Thomas hesitated. Vivian, there were inquiries made about a medical conservatorship. The words landed like a slap. He wants to declare me incompetent. I cannot prove that was his endgame. But a firm in Florida requested preliminary information about documenting cognitive decline in high-net-worth elderly clients. I am 62. I know. I run 3 charity boards. I know. I remember every birthday of every scholarship student we sponsor. I know. Thomas turned another page. There is also a life insurance policy. He slid it toward me. The policy was for 10 million. My name is the insured. Preston listed as primary beneficiary. The application included a signature that looked like mine if someone had studied it from a Christmas card. I did not cry. That surprised me most. Something in me had moved beyond tears into a bright, clean fury. Can we stop him? Yes. How fast? Thomas leaned back. For the first time since I arrived, he looked like the man Richard trusted with everything. Today, if you are ready to stop protecting his feelings. I signed revocations until my hand cramped. We revoked Preston's financial power of attorney. We notified banks. We froze accounts requiring review. We flagged suspected fraud. We placed restrictions on property transfers. We updated my will. We restructured the remaining liquid assets into a charitable trust with strict oversight. We created a medical directive naming my sister Lydia and Gloria as emergency advocates, not Preston. Gloria? Thomas asked. She has taken care of me more faithfully than my own son. He nodded and wrote it down. Then I hired an investigator. His name was Daniel Mercer, a former federal fraud examiner with a calm voice and the posture of a man who had spent years waiting for guilty people to make small mistakes. I gave him Madison's full name, Preston's business entities, the insurance documents, and every strange memory I had dismissed as grief. The missing bank statements. The sudden insistence that I stop driving at night. The tea, especially the tea. Daniel called me 6 days later. Mrs. Bennett, he said, I need you to come to my office. Not tomorrow. Today. His office was in a plain building near Schaumburg, between a dental clinic and a tax preparer. No marble. No mahogany. Just gray carpet, fluorescent lights, and the truth. He placed a file on the table. Madison Vale is not a consultant, he said. I assumed as much. She is Preston's wife. For a moment, I did not understand the sentence. Then I saw the marriage license, Preston Bennett and Madison Elise Vale. Married in Lake County. 7 months ago. The witness was a man named Carter Vale. Madison's father. Daniel slid over another page. Carter Vale has been sued 11 times for real estate fraud. He specializes in distressed property schemes, shell companies, and targeting older property owners with liquidity problems. He currently owes money to several private lenders. Violent people, from what my sources say. The room chilled. There's more, Daniel said. Of course there was. He showed me photographs of Preston and Madison entering a memory care facility in Winnetka. He showed me emails requesting pricing for secure placement of a financially vulnerable parent with suspected cognitive impairment. He showed me a draft letter from a physician I had never met stating that I showed signs of advanced confusion. My name was at the top. My life reduced to a lie on letterhead. Then came the pharmacy records. Clonazepam and Zolpidem, refilled under my name at a pharmacy I had never used. Those medications were paid for with a card linked to Preston, Daniel said. I thought of all those evenings after Richard died when Preston handed me tea. You need sleep, Mom. You're anxious, Mom. You're not yourself, Mom. The nights I woke thick-headed, the mornings I lost words. The afternoon I forgot the name of a neighbor I had known for 18 years. And Preston looked at me with practiced sadness. He had not just stolen from me. He had tried to make me disappear while I was still breathing. Daniel's final envelope contained audio transcripts. Your house system stores short clips when certain smart devices are activated, he said. Your living room camera was disabled, but the voice assistant in the bar area caught fragments from the night of the crash. I read the transcript. Preston, the plane went down. Madison, are you sure she was on it? Preston, she had to be. Madison, then smile, baby. We're free. Preston, finally. There are words that do not fade. There are words that move into your bones. I took the file home and placed it in Richard's desk drawer. That evening, Preston acted normal. He asked if I wanted salmon or chicken for dinner. Madison breezed in, wearing cream silk and carrying a shopping bag from a boutique on Oak Street. She kissed Preston on the mouth in front of me. Not a girlfriend's kiss. A wife's kiss. I watched him flinch, just a little. Vivian, she said, you look better. Less shaken. I am feeling very clear, I said. Her smile tightened. At dinner, Preston poured wine. I did not drink it. Madison talked about a property opportunity in Nashville. Preston said it might be good to unlock some dormant capital while the market was still favorable. My capital? I asked. He laughed lightly. Family capital. Interesting phrase. Madison leaned forward. Vivian, you know, money has to move to grow. So does rot, I said. If you leave it hidden too long. Preston went still. I smiled and asked Gloria for coffee. For 2 more weeks, I played the role they had written for me. Confused enough to underestimate. Calm enough to reassure. Grieving enough to excuse. I let Preston keep talking. I let Madison keep pushing. I let them believe the plane crash had shaken me into dependence. Meanwhile, Thomas and Daniel built the wall. Every account Preston could access was locked or monitored. Every property title was reviewed. Every forged signature was flagged by a handwriting expert. The insurance company opened an investigation. The doctor whose letter had been drafted in my name denied ever examining me and agreed to cooperate. Then Thomas suggested something bold. Preston has called an emergency family office meeting next Thursday, he said. He believes he can pressure you into signing a consolidation agreement. It would place nearly all remaining assets into a new management company controlled by him. Let him hold it, I said. Thomas looked over his glasses. Vivian. Let him invite the bankers. Let him invite Madison. Let him bring whoever he thinks will help corner me. You want witnesses? I want an audience. The meeting took place in the conference room of Bennett Development, on the 38th floor of a downtown tower Richard had helped finance in the early 2000s. He had not been there since the memorial board session after his funeral. Preston had slowly pushed me out, saying it was too painful for me. The moment I walked in, people stood. Some out of respect. Some out of surprise. Preston was at the head of the table. My husband's seat. Madison sat to his right in a white blazer, looking like a knife disguised as a bride. 2 bankers were there, along with a tax advisor, a junior attorney I did not recognize, and Carter Vale, Madison's father. He was tan, heavy-set, and smiling too much. Mom, Preston said. You made it. Yes, I said. I seem to keep doing that. His jaw tightened. He began with a speech about stability. He said the family assets had become too complicated. He said Richard's legacy needed modern leadership. He said recent events had reminded him how fragile life was. I looked at him when he said that. He looked away. Then he slid a document across the table. This simply allows us to streamline decision-making, he said. You still benefit, of course. But I'll handle the burden. How generous, I said. Madison touched his arm. Preston has been carrying so much. Has he? Carter Vale chuckled. Mrs. Bennett, at a certain stage, the smartest thing a matriarch can do is let the next generation drive. It turned to him. And when the next generation drives into a ditch? No one laughed. Preston's face hardened. Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You've been emotional, suspicious, forgetful. We all love you, but we need to be realistic. There it was. The script. I felt something inside me go very quiet. You believe I'm forgetful? He softened his voice for the others. I think you've been through trauma. Dad's death. The crash scare. It's a lot. And you think I'm unable to manage my affairs? I think you need help. Madison added gently, we all do. I nodded. Then I opened my purse, Ramavita folder, and placed it on the table. Thomas Blackwell entered the room behind me. So did Daniel Mercer. Preston stood so fast his chair rolled backward. What is this? He demanded. The burden, I said. I decided to handle it. Thomas distributed copies of the revocation documents. Daniel placed evidence packets in front of the bankers. The junior attorney went pale after reading the first page. I looked at Preston and said, as of last week, you no longer have financial authority over any asset owned by me, Richard's Trust, or the Bennett Foundation. Your access has been terminated, your transactions are under review. Your consolidation agreement is dead. Madison Chan slid off Preston's arm. Carter Vale stopped smiling. Preston stared at the papers. You can't do this. I already did. He lowered his voice. Mom, don't embarrass yourself. Istud. The room went silent. Embarrass myself? I said. I walked into my own home and heard my only son celebrating because he thought I had died in a plane crash. I heard him say my 18 million was finally his. I heard him say I trusted him, and that was the whole point. The banker closest to me inhaled sharply. Preston's eyes flashed toward Madison. Madison looked at the table. You misunderstood, Preston said. Daniel pressed play on a small recorder. My living room filled the conference room. The audio was scratchy, imperfect, but clear enough. The plane went down. The 18 million is ours. Finally. No one moved. Not even Carter. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked at the son I had once rocked through ear infections and nightmares and said, that was the first time you killed me. The rest was paperwork. For 3 seconds after the recording ended, the silence was so complete I could hear the air system hum above the conference table. Then Preston exploded. You recorded me? He shouted. No, I said. You recorded yourself in a house you filled with devices because you said I needed monitoring. His face twisted. Madison stood. This is insane. Preston, Weshold leave. You should sit, Thomas said calmly. There are questions regarding the insurance application, the medication records, and the proposed memory care placement. Carter Vale pushed back from the table. I don't know anything about that. Daniel turned one page. Mr. Vale, your email appears on 4 communications related to the proposed transfer of Bennett-owned property into a holding company associated with you. Carter's tan face went gray under the fluorescent lights. The bankers began gathering their documents like men trying to exit a burning building without looking gas if they were running. Preston pointed at me. His hand shook. She's confused, this proves it. She's paranoid. She's been unstable for years. I almost smiled. There it was. The final card. Thomas placed another document on the table. Mrs. Bennett underwent a full independent cognitive evaluation 3 days ago, he said. Performed by a neurologist selected by the court liaison office, not by anyone connected to the family. She scored in the superior range for memory, executive function, and verbal reasoning. The junior attorney stared at Preston as if watching a career end in real time. I said, would you like to see the part where the neurologist notes that unexplained sedatives could cause temporary confusion? Preston's anger flickered. Fear showed underneath. Madison grabbed her purse. I am not staying for this. I turned to her, Madison Vale Bennett. Her whole body stiffened. The banker closest to the door whispered, Bennett. I slid the marriage certificate across the table. Congratulations, I said. I'm sorry I missed the wedding. Preston closed his eyes. Madison glared at him. You told me she wouldn't find that. That sentence did more damage than any accusation I could have made. Thomas looked at the bankers. For the record, Mrs. Bennett has also amended her estate plan. The majority of remaining liquid assets will pass to a charitable trust upon her death. Several transfers are effective immediately. Mr. Bennett has been removed as successor trustee. Preston's head snapped toward me. No, yes. You can't cut me out. I didn't cut out my son, I said. I cut out the man who tried to profit from my coffin. He slammed both hands on the table. That money was supposed to be mine. Dad built it for me. I stepped closer to him. Your father built it while you were asleep in dinosaur pajamas. He built it while I answered calls at midnight, hosted investors in our dining room, and signed our first mortgage with hands that shook because we could barely afford it. You inherited a name, Preston, not a license to gut it. His eyes filled with tears, but they were not the tears of remorse. They were the tears of a man watching doors close. You don't know what it was like, he said. Living under him. Everyone expecting me to be Richard Bennett, every banker. Every contractor, every board member looking at me like I was the sequel nobody asked for. Then you should have become yourself. I tried. You stole. He looked around the room, desperate now. Madison's father had debts. There were bridge loans. Deals went bad. People were threatening us. I was fixing it. You drugged me. His face crumpled. The room shifted. Even Madison stopped moving. I said it again, because some Truths deserve witnesses. You drugged your mother and tried to build a legal cage around her mind. Preston whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. But you were willing. That was the difference. That was the line. Not hatred. Not greed, willingness. He tried to walk toward me. Daniel stepped subtly between us. Preston noticed. His mouth trembled. Mom, he said. Please. Don't do this in front of everyone. I looked at the people around that table. Men in suits. A beautiful young wife with panic in her eyes. A father-in-law calculating his escape. Lawyers, bankers, witnesses. All the polished machinery that had almost turned my life into a quiet disappearance. I am doing it in front of everyone, I said, because you tried to erase me in private. Thomas closed his folder. Mr. Bennett, my advice is that you retain independent counsel. Immediately. The meeting ended in pieces. The bankers left first, promising cooperation. The junior attorney left without shaking Preston's hand. Carter Vale tried to pull Madison toward the door, but she stayed long enough to hiss something at Preston I could not hear. Whatever it was, it broke him more than my evidence did. By sunset, Preston was back at the house. I had expected him. Gloria was in the kitchen with two of her nephews, both off-duty police officers built like refrigerators. She had insisted. I did not argue. Preston came through the front door without knocking, still wearing the same suit from the meeting, his tie loosened, his hair wild from running his hands through it. This is my home too, he said. No, I replied from the bottom of the staircase. It was your shelter. You mistook that for ownership. He looked behind me. At Gloria's nephews. You're afraid of me now? I am prepared for you now. That hurt him. I saw it. Good. For years, he had fed on my unwillingness to see him clearly. He walked into the living room, the same room where he had celebrated my death. Rain streaked the windows again, as if the weather had circled back to watch the ending. I messed up, he said. I know I messed up. But you don't understand what Madison did. She pushed and pushed. Her father had people after him. She said if I didn't get control, we'd lose everything. She said you'd never help me if I told you the truth. She was right about one thing, I said. I would not have helped you steal from me. He laughed bitterly. There it is. The perfect Vivian Bennett. Saint Vivian. Charity Queen. Richard's elegant widow. I said nothing. His voice rose, you loved Dad more than you ever loved me. The accusation struck an old, bruised place in me. I had feared that after Richard died. I had wondered if my grief had swallowed too much of the room. I had replayed dinners where Preston talked and I only half listened because he was staring at Richard's empty chair. Preston saw the flicker in my face and stepped toward it like a burglar seeing an unlocked window. You don't even deny it. I loved your father deeply, I said. And I loved you enough to survive losing him. He blinked. You were not neglected, Preston. You were worshipped. That may have been the problem. His face hardened. I am your son. I had known he would say it. The words arrived like a key to an old room. Once, they would have opened everything. That night, they opened nothing. My son was the boy who slept on the floor beside our old dog when she was dying so she wouldn't be alone. My son was the teenager who cried after he dented his first car because he thought your father would be disappointed. My son was the young man who held my hand at the cemetery and promised we would keep each other standing. My voice shook, but I did not stop. You are the man who heard I might have burned in a field and said finally. He flinched as if I had struck him. Then sank onto the sofa. For a moment, he looked 9 years old again. Small. Lost. Waiting for me to make the world gentle. I don't have anywhere to go, he said. Yes, you do. Where? To the truth. He covered his face. Mom, please. I wanted to go to him. That was the worst part. Not the theft. Not the lies. Not even the recording. The worst part was that some portion of my body still believed my child's pain was my emergency. It gripped my cross until the edge pressed into my skin. You have 1 hour to pack personal belongings, I said. Gloria will observe. You will leave all documents, keys, devices, and company property. If anything is missing, Thomas will file immediately. He looked up slowly. You're throwing me out? No. I'm stopping you from staying where you planned my disappearance. His mouth twisted. You'll regret this. I already regret too. Much. He stood so fast the coffee table rattled. Then he ran upstairs. For the next 47 minutes, the house sounded like a storm trapped inside walls. Drawers slammed, closet doors banged. Something broke in his bathroom. He cursed Madison. He cursed her father. He cursed Richard. Finally, he cursed me. Gloria stood beside me, arms folded, eyes wet but fierce. When Preston came down with 2 suitcases, he paused at the front door. If Dad were here, he'd be ashamed of you, he said. That one almost found its mark, almost. I looked at him, my only child, my almost murderer, my broken boy. If your father were here, I said, you would have been too scared to become this. He opened the door and walked into the rain. The house did not feel peaceful after he left. People think justice arrives with music. It does not. It arrives with paperwork, trembling hands, and a silence so wide you can hear every memory walking through it. I cried in the living room floor after Gloria locked the door. Not elegantly. Not like a rich widow in a movie. I cried until my ribs hurt. I cried for the baby I had almost lost before him. I cried for the little boy with muddy shoes. I cried for every time I mistook manipulation for tenderness. I cried because part of me had died in that plane crash. After all, even though I had never boarded. The next morning, the world began collecting its debts. Madison left Preston 9 days later. Daniel found out because she emptied a private account Preston had hidden in Nevada, took a diamond bracelet I had stupidly given her for Christmas, and flew to Miami under her maiden name. Her father disappeared around the same time, leaving behind furious lenders who began calling Preston. Before breakfast and after midnight. The insurance company opened a fraud investigation. The banks filed reports. 2 investors from Preston's failed side deals sued him for misrepresentation. Bennett Development's board removed him from all management roles pending review. He called me 23 times in one day. I answered once. Mom, he said, voice ragged. Madison cleaned me out. I sat at Richard's desk, looking at the oak tree. Outside beginning to turn gold. That must feel terrible. She lied to me. Yes. She used me. Yes. He waited. I let the silence teach. Finally he whispered, you're not going to help me? I am not going to rescue you from the consequences of helping someone hurt me. I'll go to jail. That depends on what you did. You'd let that happen to your own son? I let a surgeon cut open your chest when you were 12 because infection had reached your heart lining, I said. You screamed for me not to let them take you. I signed the consent form anyway because saving you hurt. Do not confuse love with stopping pain. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, I hate you. I know. I hung up before he could hear me sob. The charitable trust became active that winter. Thomas suggested waiting until my death to distribute the money. I refused. I had spent too much time almost dead already. The first transfer renovated a family waiting center at Lurie Children's Hospital. The second funded emergency housing for older women whose families had abandoned them. The third saved a literacy program in Milwaukee that Richard had quietly supported for years. We paid off the mortgage of a small veterans residence in Rockford. We created 12 scholarships for first-generation college students. We funded legal clinics for seniors fighting financial abuse by relatives. Every dollar Preston had tried to turn into a yacht, a Miami condo, or Madison's escape plan became beds, meals, books, medicine, and lawyers for people who had nobody named Bennett to protect them. The newspapers called it a stunning philanthropic move. They did not know it was also revenge. Not loud revenge. Not the kind with shattered windows and screaming. Better. I made his greed useful. Months passed. Preston's life collapsed in stages. He sold his watches first. Then his car. Then the downtown apartment I had not known he owned. His friends vanished with the speed off wealthy people avoiding bad weather. Madison filed a civil claim against him related to debts he had signed for during their marriage. Carter Vale resurfaced briefly when federal agents questioned him, then vanished again. One afternoon in March, I received a call from a woman named Claire Donovan. I knew the name. Claire had dated Preston before Madison. She was kind, practical, a school administrator with brown hair and a laugh that made rooms warmer. I had liked her. Preston had said she was too ordinary. Mrs. Bennett, she said carefully, I'm sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. I don't know if I should be calling. Then say it quickly before you change your mind. She exhaled. Preston is at Northwestern Memorial. He collapsed at a diner, bleeding ulcer, dehydration, panic attack, maybe more. He listed you as emergency contact, but the hospital couldn't reach you because he had an old number. My hand tightened around the phone. Is he alone? Yes. Of course he was. I went. Not because he deserved it. Because motherhood is not a faucet you shut off. It is a scar you learn not to scratch. When he saw me, his face crumpled. Mom. I stood at the foot of the bed for a moment. The last time I had seen him in a hospital, he was 12, furious and terrified, tubes taped to his chest. Richard had paced the hallway all night. I had held Preston's hand and told him nothing bad could get past me. Now the bad thing was in the bed. You look awful, I said. He gave a broken laugh that became a cough. I feel worse. The nurse came in, checked his and told me he was stable. When she left, Preston stared at the blanket. Madison never came, he said. No, I called her. I assumed. She said I ruined her life. I pulled a chair beside the bed but did not take his hand. Did you? He closed his eyes. I ruined everyone's. There it was. Not enough. But something. He turned his head toward me. Do you hate me? The easy answer was no. The honest answer was complicated. I hate what you did. That's not what I asked. I know. His eyes filled. I keep hearing myself say finally. So did I hear it too, I said. He pressed both hands against his face and sobbed. Not performative sobs. Not the conference room tears of a cornered man. These came from somewhere lower. Uglier, maybe real. I thought if I could just get control of the money, I could fix everything before you knew. Then the debts got worse. Madison kept saying you were selfish, that you would donate it all, that Dad never meant for me to beg for my own inheritance. Then you missed that plane and for 1 second I felt free. He looked at me with the shame of that sentence burning through him. Then you walked in. And I realized. What kind of person feels free because his mother is dead? I sat very still. I didn't know how to come back from that, he whispered. You may not come back to who you were. Then what do I do? You tell the truth, I said. To the investigators. To the people you stole from. To yourself. Then you pay what you can. Then you live smaller. Then you wake up tomorrow and do it again. He wiped his face. Can I come home when I get out? No, the word hurt both of us. He nodded like he had expected it and still hoped against it. Can you help me? I will pay this hospital bill directly, I said. Basic care. Nothing more. I will not give you cash. I will not call off lawyers. I will not lie for you. I will not ask anyone to trust you. He turned toward the window. That's all? That is more than you earned. He flinched, then nodded. Before I left, he reached weakly toward the cross at my neck. Dad gave you that? Yes. He'd be ashamed of me. Yes, I said. The word came out like a blade wrapped in velvet. Preston closed his eyes. But he would also tell you shame is useless unless it becomes honesty. I stood. Start there. 2 years have passed since the night I heard my son celebrate my death. Preston lives in a small rented room outside Joliet now. He works as an office assistant for a warehouse logistics company. He has no company card, no assistant, no custom suits. He takes the train. He packs his lunch. He is still under financial judgment. Some investigations ended in settlements. Some consequences are still unfolding. I do not interfere. He writes me letters. Real letters, on cheap lined paper. At first, they were full of apologies that sounded like requests wearing a costume. I did not answer. Then they changed. Today I told the investigator the truth about the forged signatures. Today I paid $83 toward the Donovan loan. Today I wanted to blame Madison, but I didn't. Today I remembered Dad teaching me to shake a man's hand and mean it. Today I did not lie. I keep every letter in a blue box in Richard's desk. Sometimes I write back. Not often. Enough for him to know the door to becoming decent exists. Not enough for him to mistake it for the door to my house. The Lake Forest house is different now. I sold some of the heavy furniture Preston loved because it made him feel important. I turned Richard's old cigar room into area ding room for the scholarship students when they visit. Gloria still runs the kitchen like a benevolent general. Her nephews come by for holidays. My sister Lydia stays over 1 weekend a month and complains that my coffee is too strong. On Sundays, I go to the women's residence the trust helped open. The residents call it Bennett House, though I tried to name it after Richard. They refused. One woman, Marlene, told me, "Honey, dead men get enough buildings. Let a living woman have one." So Bennett House it is. Many of the women there were abandoned by children who wanted checks, houses, signatures. Silence. Some were left in hospitals. Some were tricked out of savings. Some still make excuses for sons and daughters who only call on the first of the month. I sit with them after lunch. We drink bad coffee. We talk about grandchildren, recipes, old songs, blood pressure, betrayal. Sometimes they ask if I forgave Preston. People love that question because they think forgiveness is a courtroom where someone is declared free. It is not. Forgiveness, for me, has been more like learning to stop standing at the window during storms, waiting for the boy I raised to come running up the driveway. It has been accepting that the man who hurt me may become better and still never again be safe enough to hold my keys. It has been understanding that I can love my son without handing him a weapon. I do not know if Preston will become a good man. He is trying not to be the man from that recording. Some days, that is all I can bear to hope for. Last October, on what would have been Richard's birthday, I drove to the cemetery alone. The oak over his grave had turned red early, just as it always did. I brought 1 cup of black coffee for myself and poured a splash onto the grass for him, a silly ritual he would have mocked and secretly loved. I told him everything. About The crash. About Preston. About Madison. About the conference room. About the hospital. About the trust. About the children at Lurie who now had a place for their parents to sleep. About the veterans in Rockford who sent a photograph of themselves standing under a repaired roof. About Marlene at Bennett House, who had started a poker night and was apparently cheating everyone blind. The wind moved through the oak leaves. I touched the cross at my throat. I didn't die, I said softly. Not on that plane, not in my living room. Not in the conference room when my son called me confused, not in the hospital when he asked to come home. I had thought survival meant continuing to breathe. I know now it is more than that. Survival is taking your name back from people who use love as a signature pad. It is moving money before greed can rot it. It is refusing to become cruel just because cruelty taught you its language. Preston wanted my death to give him a new life. Instead, my life took away the lie he was living. And every time I walk through Bennett House and hear women laughing over coffee, every time a scholarship student emails me a photo from a dorm room, every time a child's mother writes that she slept 6 hours in a clean bed near the hospital, I think of that night in the rain. I think of my son's voice saying finally. Then I look at what finally became. Not a yacht. Not Madison's diamonds. Not a stolen empire built in a widow's slow erasure. Food. Beds. Medicine. Books. Second chances. Hope. That is the part Preston never understood. Money can buy comfort, power, silence, and beautiful lies. But in the right hands, it can also become proof that someone survived. And I did.